Home Secretary, you're chair of the Labour Party's National Executive Committee. Will Andy Burnham be allowed to compete for the Labour nomination in Gorton and Denton?
Well, look, I think Andy's a fantastic mayor for Greater Manchester, and I really appreciated the letter that he wrote to myself and the rest of the National Executive yesterday. I thought he made his case in a very fair-minded and decent way. That is now a decision for the National Executive Committee. The officers will meet later on today. I am the chair of that committee, and I think it's my job to be an impartial chair. I won't want to say anything that gets ahead of that discussion later on today. It's not my job as the chair to make comments and, potentially leave myself open to the accusation that I'm trying to sway the debate in one direction or the other. I think that would be completely inappropriate. I play these things with a straight bat. We have the meeting later on today, and that's where the decision will be made.
Would one of the options available to that committee, before it considers what Mr Burnham wants, the question of whether there should be an all-female shortlist or an all-minority shortlist?
Well, the party sometimes has all-women shortlists. Of course, you can't, by law, have all ethnic minority shortlists, so there's a legal position there. But that's not the decision for today. Later on today, we will be deciding one question, which is Andy, as a Metro Mayor at the moment, has sought permission to stand in the by-election. Under our Labour Party rules, anybody who is a mayor or a police and crime commissioner, if they want to run for a different political office, such as Member of Parliament, they do have to seek permission from the National Executive. That's what's going to happen later on today. And then we will have a shortlisting panel, so a panel of members of the NEC alongside regional and local party representatives will then convene to do a long list and then a short list for selection. And it will be party members that vote in that selection.
But, sorry, not to be boring about it, but so you could actually say to Andy Burnham, yeah, you have permission to run, but the NEC could decide to make it an all-female shortlist if it wanted to.
No, I think the first decision, we have to take these in stages. The first decision is he's asked for permission to run. That will be the decision that is made later on today. There will no doubt be a discussion about whether we want to have an all-woman shortlist at some point. But the first decision is a Metro Mayor has asked for permission. He's done exactly what the rules require him to do. We will now make that decision.
I'm just saying that...
No, I understand.
It could still be open to make this an all-woman shortlist. That's all I'm saying, asking.
Yes, that is a question that has not yet been decided, so that is very much still in the mix. I wouldn't want to get ahead of what the NEC might want to do in that respect, but we don't do all ethnic minority shortlists because that would be against the law.
Would you personally like to see Andy Burnham back in the Commons?
Look, I genuinely think Andy is a fantastic politician. I worked closely with him before. We've discussed police reform together. We've discussed funding for Greater Manchester Police. I worked very closely with him in the response to the terrorist attack in Manchester at the Heaton Park synagogue. I think he's an exceptional politician. And of course, I always think we should have all of our best players making their contribution to the Labour government. He is a Metro Mayor at this point. The rules require him to seek permission. As I say, I think he's gone about this in the right way. I really appreciated the tone of the letter that he wrote yesterday. But I am an independent chair of that NEC, and the decision is yet to be made. And I will be giving all members of the NEC officers a chance to make their case.
I hear this response that from all the top Labour people that you want all the top talent in the team and all the rest of it. But when you're assembling a team, everybody's got to be in the right position. Mm-hmm. And the question, I think, about Andy Burnham is, what's the right position? I mean, let me put it another way. Are you worried that if Burnham gives up the mayoralty of Greater Manchester, you could be beaten by reform in the election? I looked at the polls, and out of 22 of the 27 parliamentary constituencies in the Greater Manchester area, 22 of them are forecast right now to be reform wins. So if Burnham moves, another candidate won't have his popular standing, his personal vote. So you could lose a mayoralty if he gives it up.
Well, look, I mean, I think these are all questions that are further downstream of the choice that has to be made today. My general position on these things, though, is that, you can't go into any kind of election, by-election, a mayoralty, a local election, anything other than on the front foot. We are a Labour government. We've made big changes to the country. We know that the country is still impatient for more change. We know ourselves that more has to change in the country. But we go in confident to that by-election. If there were other elections that are as a consequence of that by-election, then again, I would say that the Labour Party has a strong case to make to the people of Denton, first and foremost, and people across the country, whether that's in Manchester or elsewhere.
You say the Labour Party's got a strong case, but isn't it a damaging signal for Labour that Andy Burnham clearly thinks that he needs to be in the Commons as quickly as possible for the simple reason that he thinks the Prime Minister could be gone sometime soon and he needs to be there if he wants to compete?
Oh, well, you know, I'm not the sort of person that indulges in these sorts of hypotheticals. Look, I think that we should take Andy at his word. He has said himself that the best person to be Prime Minister is Keir Starmer. He wrote a letter yesterday in which he said he's coming in if he's allowed, and if he were to win a by-election, his motivation is to make a contribution in Parliament. I think he made a case about wanting to take the lessons of Manchester and apply them in a much more national context and make the case as part of a Labour government. That's his position. I don't think that all of these, hypotheticals, machinations, these are. I understand why people ask these questions, but to be honest, from my perspective, we as a government and as a party need to pull together. We have tough local elections coming up. We have a strong case to make to the country. I'm not scared of Reform or the Greens. I say we take the fight to them. It's a fight I believe we can win.
Yeah, but the problem is that this isn't necessarily in your hands. Andy Burnham comes back to the Commons. You know what's going to happen. There will be a continuing psychodrama about whether, he would be a better leader, whether there should be a contest, and so on. Don't you feel at least a bit that he has launched, if you like, a battle inside the Labour Party that you can't afford at the moment, given where you are in the polls, given, as you say, you've got an election coming? Would you have preferred if he had just said, no, I'm not, it's not my time?
Everyone has to make their own decisions. What I would say is I think everybody could do with less psychodrama, and my clear message to all of my colleagues, whoever they are, in Cabinet, elsewhere in the country, is we'd get to decide if we're going to indulge in a psychodrama. I don't want it
But he's created it. He's created it. We're talking about it now.
But my message to everyone is the country was absolutely fed up to the back teeth of the Tories and all of their psychodrama and the constant vying
you're doing
for
it
the
again.
top position. But that's what I mean. I don't think the country will forgive us if we end up doing exactly the same as the Conservative Party. So everybody, my clear message to all colleagues everywhere is we should just calm down. We're in government. Labour governments don't come along that often in the history of our great country. We have the absolute privilege of being the government of our country. We should all pull together and make a success of it. I believe we can. I believe we've started to make the right changes for this country. We have to follow that through.
Today you're announcing the establishment of a national police service, what you call British FBI. I know that there isn't a complete parallel. For example, our police are not armed. Mm-hmm. But does this extraordinary confrontation that's taking place in Minneapolis between the federal and the local law enforcement give you any pause for thought that maybe setting up a contest between local and national might not be that wise?
No, I'm not worried about that. And obviously what's happened in the States, there's a live investigation. And just as I wouldn't make comments about a live investigation here in this country, I don't think it's appropriate to do that for what's happening in the States. But what I would say is our system here is very different. As you say, our police are not, in the ordinary run of things, armed officers. We do have armed officers in our forces, but they are deployed in a different way. And our model has always been policing by consent. And I think that is an incredibly important differentiation between the way we do policing in this country and where it happens elsewhere in the world. And I think that the reforms that we are making are actually about having a model for policing in this country that is able to keep pace with the changing nature of crime. So we already know there's good policing in this country. We've seen good falls in the number of murders, in knife crime, but we also know that separate to that, everyday crime like theft, phone theft in particular, shoplifting, antisocial behaviour, that's on the rise. And the changes that I'm bringing forward are not designed to put different bits of the system in competition with one another, but to actually complement each other so that we have the right policing in the right place.
Well, indeed, you rightly say that, in a sense, the thing that most people are worried about are antisocial behaviour, drunkenness, shoplifting. And you've got some experience of your own in this. How is this reorganisation actually going to help, for example, people like your family who ran shops?
Yeah, I mean, look, firstly, I really recognise that what we used to think of as low-level crime, and it was often normal to describe shoplifting as low-level crime, it's not low-level. It has a tremendously negative impact on individuals and also wider communities. And I think if people feel that things like shop theft, antisocial behaviour, if they feel like they're going unpunished, which is how it feels across large parts of the country today, it really tears away at the fabric of our society. It makes people not feel proud of where they live. And then, you feel like you're living in a breakdown of law and order, even if other types of serious violence crime are coming down. So the point of our reforms is a national police service will deal with all of the national and international crime. It will be their job to go after terrorists, serious organised criminals, fraudsters. We need a really agile national service that can keep pace with the international criminals who change their business model all the time. We'll have fewer regional forces who can focus on specialist investigations, like for murder, for rape, for serious violence. And within those forces, we will have local police areas whose main job, whose raison d'etre, the thing they get up to do every single day, is police their local communities.
Well, I want to come back to you on the national crime in a second, but since 2010, shop theft is up 72%, street theft up by nearly 60%. Citizens' Advice say that 9 million people falling for financial scams. Now, I know that, you had this family business. I think your father had put a cricket bat behind the counter because people would be coming in and taking stuff out. Now, Baroness Casey, when she reviewed the Met, who reduced the number of units, command units, from 32 to 12, really similarly to what you're trying to do nationally, what she said was that reduction in the number of units to become larger actually led to deprioritisation of the kinds of things that both you and I are saying people are concerned about: shoplifting, antisocial behaviour and so on. How do you prevent what has happened in London happening nationally if what you do is you take command away from localities?
Well, I'm really glad you brought up Louise Casey's review, because actually one of the bigger points that she made was because the Met has these national responsibilities, all counter-terror policing is run for the whole country out of the Met. And because they have this big national responsibility, it actually distracts away from the regular policing of London. That was one of her big critiques. And so that's why I want to move all of these national capabilities, like counter-terror policing, like national responsibility for standards, like national procurement, into the National Police Service, so that the Met just polices London, and its main focus, day in, day out, is keeping communities in London safe. So I think if you move national capabilities into the National Police Service, it actually frees up forces in order to concentrate on neighbourhoods, on communities, and also on specialist investigations for crimes like murder and rape. In the end, I think this is the model that embeds community policing, embeds neighbourhood policing, and makes sure that we go after every type of crime in the right way.
Well, it's not just the structure of police, is it? It's also the culture of police. For example, police visit people's homes to respond to complaints about tweets, but you'll never see a copper after car theft, and you won't also see them after a burglary. Isn't part of the problem not necessarily the structure or resourcing, but just the priorities of the police at the moment? What are you going to do about that?
Well, look, I fully hear that case. It's something I've spoken about myself. I think that if the police are seen to be going after perfectly legal tweets, it does cost confidence, and the public does think, well, hang on a minute, exactly as you say, somebody nicked my phone the other day and no one cared, but somebody tweeted maybe about women's rights or something else that's, part of the so-called culture war, and then suddenly the police are all over it. That I think even policing leaders have recognised does cost cost confidence in policing.
So you want to stop them policing people's
I will
behaviours?
Yes, and I will be saying more about that in the coming days. But I've been very clear that perfectly legal tweets and policing the so-called culture war is not what our police are for. They are here to go after criminals, to catch criminals, to bring them to justice, to help prevent crime and to deter crime by having a visible presence in all of our communities. And all of these reforms taken together are about visible neighbourhood policing and making sure that people in our communities feel safe.
Well, let me put you give you another example of how this works or fails to work. We understand that it is proposed that under-16s are going to be banned from social media, or at least being discussed in government. You can impose fines on social media platforms, but in the end, somebody's going to need to investigate complaints that some teenagers doing something unlawful in their bedroom or behind the bike shed. And in the end, it's going to fall to the police. And it will be one more task for a force that is already overloaded. Isn't part of the problem that you, government, keep creating these things for the police to do that really are none of their business?
Well, I think you're right that, it's for the government to make sure that the laws that we're passing for police are appropriate and that we are laser-like focused on going after the crimes that we know are costing people in our communities confidence in policing and also just not having general pride in their local area. So I would agree. I would agree with that.
Start policing teenagers' bedrooms.
But I mean, it's going to
get worse.
The government's position is there's going to be a genuinely open consultation. Of course, the Australians have moved to a ban. I think there is a strong case for a ban, by the way, because I think the social media environment poses huge dangers for our young people at a time when, their characters, their personalities, their minds are forming. I think we should take a second look at the sort of environment that we let our children grow up in. That is the nation's business. But where the enforcement lies, I think, is a question for the consultation. And of course, I wouldn't want the police to be in a position where we have a law that is either impossible to enforce or is so costly to enforce that it means they can't go after ordinary crimes. So that's on us. But actually, this model of policing will effectively embed the necessity for policing to focus on their local police areas whilst leaving the specialist investigations to regional forces and the national work to the National Police Service.
OK, if I may just ask about a couple of other things quickly. By my reckoning, pulling the bill to hand over the Chagos Island to Mauritius from the House of Lords, which you did on Friday night, is U-turn number 14 since Keir Starmer became Prime Minister. Who made you back down? Was it the Tories or Donald Trump?
I think what happened there was in the Lords, there was a wrecking amendment put down by the Tories and the Liberal Democrats. They know that we don't have a majority in the Lords and it was designed to wreck the bill. So the bill was pulled for that reason. And now, of course, we will, be in discussions with members of the House of Lords to try and get the bill through. We are in a difficult position as a government because whilst we have a big majority in the Commons, that's not the case in the Lords.
Are you sure it wasn't just because Donald Trump made a fuss about it?
Let me deal with that directly. No, I think the Prime Minister dealt with that himself in Prime Minister's questions just last week when he was very clear. When we made this deal, he spoke to President Trump about it. President Trump welcomed it. All of the rest of our Five Eyes partners also welcomed it because they do believe, as we do, Diego Garcia as a military base is critical to our national security. And I think, as the Prime Minister said at PMQs, the President's about turn on that probably has a lot more to do with the position on Greenland than anything else.
As we're on talking about Mr. Trump, here's what he had to say about British service personnel today. We know what he said earlier on in the week. Mm-hmm. This tweet is, very great, very brave soldiers of the United Kingdom, all the rest of it. There's one word which doesn't seem to be there, which is sorry. Mm. Is this sort of apology good enough?
I think it's a recognition that what was said initially was deeply offensive. It was really insulting to the memories of our brave soldiers who gave their lives in conflict and who came to the aid of the United States after NATO Article 5 was invoked. It's really, I think it really affected everyone in the country to see the contribution and the sacrifice of our brave armed forces personnel denigrated in that way. I do welcome the most recent tweet because it is a recognition at least of the contribution and the sacrifice that has been made.
But it's not really an apology, is it? I mean, it even says By the way, you're only the second best armed forces.
Look, the President has his way. The Prime Minister, actually, when they had a call to discuss matters relating to Ukraine and other international issues, the Prime Minister did make the point directly to the President how we felt about the initial comments, and I think this was a response to that. With the President, I suspect this is as good as it gets.
Look, can I just ask you about one last set of things? Your successor at the Justice Department wants to cancel jury trials. Your colleague, Steve Reed, announced cancellation of elections in 29 local authorities, most of which are Labour. Two things. One, on the cancellation of elections, you're for it, aren't you, of reform? That's first thing.
No, look, there is a reorganisation happening in local government, so there is a genuine question.
Cancel the democracy because it's inconvenient.
I think, as a community secretary has said, there is a genuine question about use of taxpayers' money and on running elections for boundaries that are about to change. And so, on that measure, it makes sense to wait until the reorganisation has taken place and you get a fresh set of elections. These elections are coming.
Now Labour puts a price on democracy. Does it?
No, it's about reorganisation, right? And it's about making sure that the elections, if they're taking place now, and then the boundaries change very quickly thereafter, I think there is a good case for saying that we should wait until the reorganisation has happened and then we'll do the elections. Let me be very clear, though, Trevor, there are big local elections coming in May. Nobody here is scared of elections. I've run election campaigns. I love them, and I'm very up for a fight.
I know you did ran the last general election for Labour, but you're cancelling jury trials. You're now advocating for elections, what used to be called in the Soviet Union administrative measures. I mean, that's what Joseph Stalin did. He used that term again. Don't you feel at least a little embarrassed?
No, look, there's a separate case on devolution and elections that the Community Secretary has set up. But I really do want to challenge this point on jury trials, because it is the case already that the vast majority of cases, criminal cases, are dealt with in the Magistrates' Court and never see the inside of a Crown Court or a jury. It's completely appropriate for the government to decide the boundary between those cases that are heard by a jury and those that are not. And all we are doing is changing where the boundary sits. There will still be jury trials in this country for the most serious offences, but we also have to have a justice system worthy of the name, and that is why these changes are necessary, so that justice delayed is not justice denied.
Home Secretary, thank you for your time this morning.
Thank you.